Namaste. Welcome to the Festival of Bharat. I'm your host Kamal Madi Shetty, and you're tuned into season 4 of the Festival of Bharat. Our guest today needs no introduction. He is a veteran of the Indian Army and a well known commentator on issues of strategic affairs, military matters, and geopolitics. We have with us Major Gaurav Arya ji. Namaste, Major ji, and welcome to the Festival of Bharat.
Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me over.
Thank you so much for joining us, Major ji. Uh,
Sure.
you know, when interviewing you, some of the first issues and matters that come to mind, is matters associated with Pakistan, China, strategic issues, military affairs. And we are going to discuss all of that with you today. But Majorji, I want to start by talking about something that hasn't been discussed much on different platforms, including our own platform. And that is the issue of information and psychological warfare. Can you tell us what exactly this means and why should Indians pay attention to it?
Uh, Kamal, this is a great question. And within the question, there are various answers, which I will try and bring out now. Uh, you see, when we talk of a wider spectrum of conflict, which is non conventional, asymmetric, hybrid, gray zone, somewhere they dovetail, and they are all separate issues, they're all different, but somewhere they dovetail into influence operations. So, like Sun Tzu said 2,500 years ago, he said that true victory is achieved by not fighting at all, or words to that effect, where if you can win without fighting, that is true victory. So, what they do is that over a period of time, people have realized that while conventional conflict or conventional capability is always going to be there in your hands, because that is the final insurance policy that any country has, that tanks, aircraft, nuclear weapons, these are the final arguments of any state. But under the nuclear overhang, under the nuclear threshold, there is always space either for limited war, which is a conventional war, or hybrid warfare, in which there is no bloodshed, but you can cause a lot of unease to the adversary. And this is where information warfare comes in. And information warfare has got various platforms. It can be there in print. So you find a lot of articles which are against India, false articles, fake articles in reputed magazines like the New York Times and the Washington Post. And they're totally fake. And I'll tell you why I think they are fake. Because the people who write those articles are the same people who say that nobody is allowed to go into Kashmir, and then they write an article about Kashmir. So how can you write about Kashmir without going to Kashmir? This beats all logic, but they write it and they get space. Similarly, on television, you have various channels who would, both inside the country and outside the country, who would take a certain narrative, and we call them fifth columnists, people who open the doors of the fort from within. This is something that I've been saying, that the doors of India's forts and castles have always been opened from within and not from outside. And lastly, social media. This actually exploded with social media on the scene, in which a lot of people along the way have used social media to harm India, to create a certain narrative. All these things come under the ambit of what we know as influence operations. The ability to influence the minds of, if I may use the word enemy country, the enemy country's population, their way of thinking, create pressure. So in India, while everybody has a right to protest, and this is a constitutionally given right, not given by you or me or anybody else, not even by the ruling dispensation, this is given by the Constitution of India, and this right is sacred and nobody disputes it. But you will find the enemy taking advantage of such, protests, whether it's Shaheen Bagh, whether it's the farmer protests. And of course, the farmers have every right to protest. Why not? They are citizens of this country. As long as they're protesting peacefully, which they largely are, I think they're absolutely right in wanting to protest. We can always dispute that, you have been misled, etc. That's another matter altogether. But they have every right to protest. But what the enemy does is take advantage of this situation. And this comes under the ambit of hybrid warfare also. And you mentioned psychological operations, or PSYOPs, as they are known in the military or the armed forces. Again, try to create psychological pressure through various forms of communication. Psychological pressure on the enemy forces or on the enemy population, to degrade and denude the capability to fight by reducing morale. When you have lost, it is like a classic example is during the Falkland Island Wars, fought between the UK and Argentina. There's this huge psychological weapon used by the UK that the Gurkhas are coming. And tales were told on BBC about how the Gurkhas spared nobody when they came. And there are cases, documented cases, where the Argentinians just ran away. They heard that the Gurkhas were coming and they abandoned their posts. Such was the fear of the Gurkhas. So that is one level of psychological operations. What we are seeing is a mixture of many levels of operations, including gray zone warfare, in which politics is used. So if you look at the Chinese three warfare strategy, I'm sure everybody's heard of it, the three warfare strategies. So you have information warfare, you have media warfare, you have legal warfare, you have all these kinds of warfare which are used, which are not traditionally conventional methods of fighting a war. But people use these methods, and therefore this is something that India must develop capabilities in. That's what I feel.
Thank you, Major Ji. I think those are very insightful comments. I want to actually come to one example, and that is of China. Last year, what we saw was during the border standoff, we saw China put up certain videos, where there was military equipment and forces who were moved from the mainland to the border areas, and there were other videos as well. We've seen some examples. So I wanted to understand from you, how does China approach psyops, and how is it different from, let's say, some other countries like the US, for example?
China has a distinct advantage. China is ruled by a despot. China has no democracy, and I've been to China many a times. I don't think I'll get the visa anymore, but I've been to China many times in the past, and I can tell you, Kamal, that if you've been there, you'll have this experience also, that as you enter mainland China, after 10 odd minutes, your social media platforms stop working. So Twitter does not work, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, or any other social media platform which is Western, quote unquote, that stops working as soon as you enter China. Now, why does that happen? That happens because essentially China is afraid of its own population. China is not so afraid of America. China is not afraid of India's fearsome mountain divisions, which are the finest in the world, by the way. China is afraid of its own people. China is afraid of free speech. China is afraid of free opinion, which is why you had the Tiananmen Square. You had those, in 50s, you had the Tibetan uprising. Then you had the Falun Gong. And even now you have the Hong Kong issue, which is still simmering, and it's not totally been arrested or has been quietened. So all these things are expression of people of China being extremely unhappy with the way China is run. So anybody who's done MBA or learned management a little bit will know about the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And self-actualization comes at the top. This is some very basic stuff which we all read. And the way to tackle China, I'll come as to how China does it. But before that, I would just want to say that if you read Maslow's theory properly, therein lies the actual hint as to how you can tackle China. Because people in China now have money, they have stature, they have a certain standing in the world, right? But if you ask any country, everybody recognizes China as an economic superpower and an emerging military superpower. But if I gave you a choice, would you like to settle down in, let us say, Singapore, which is a small country, smaller than New Delhi, or smaller than Delhi, or would you like to settle down in China? You would always say Singapore. In spite of the fact that China is so powerful and so everything, XYZ, but no China. Even Pakistanis who treat China as their elder brothers and say that our friendship is sweeter than honey and deeper than the oceans and higher than the Himalayas. All the Pakistanis, you'll never see them lining up outside the Chinese embassy. It's always the US embassy and the Canadian embassy and the UK High Commission, etc., etc., etc. So herein lies the Chinese philosophy. It is a predatory power, and it hides behind the famed bamboo curtain. So we all think that the Chinese are inscrutable. There is no freedom of the media. There is no freedom of social media. There is no freedom of opinion. And entire families are kept inside re-education camps for saying things that are contrary to the interests of the Communist Party of China. And one more thing which many Indians don't know, that PLA, the People's Liberation Army, I'm sure because you keep on reading about it and you're involved in so many strategic affairs and such things, at least from the educational and reading perspective, you would know that. But the People's Liberation Army is not the army of China. It is the armed wing of the Communist Party of China. So loyalty to the party comes first, and any voice which is contrary to the party line is taken as sedition, and then entire families are punished. Now, how does China do information warfare? It does it very easily, because in China it is very easy to do. It controls every facet of your thinking and communication. So try sending an email to your friend in China. And this I'm saying to all your viewers, okay? Send an email and write democracy twice, write protest twice, and write Tiananmen Square, write Falun Gong. That email will never reach. Or they will just black out large parts of the email. I've sent emails to my business partners in China, which have reached after a week. An email is supposed to be instant, but they've reached after a week. So there's a blacked out everything. So they're very common in China. This is how they do it, because they have ready-made platforms. Their Weibo is a ready-made platform. The servers are in China. And it's only people who have proven their loyalty and actually work and get paid by the Communist Party of China or the state are allowed to use Twitter handles, like, for example, Global Times, which is supposed to be a very reputed newspaper of China. But the fact is that it's a Communist Party mouthpiece, and it says so very proudly. It's not a matter of shame for them. It's a matter of pride for them that we're the mouthpiece of the Communist Party of China. So that is how the Chinese do it. And they do it very well, given that they already have a ready-made platform available with them and the kind of environment that they have in their country where, you cannot question. So information warfare becomes much easier. So that is how the Chinese do it.
Very fascinating, Major Ji. It kind of brings me to my next question, which is about Pakistan. And
Yes.
Pakistan has a very dedicated organization called the ISPR. So can you tell us about that, and how Pakistan approaches information warfare and psyops?
For Pakistan, information was never about actually influence ops. For Pakistan, it was a matter of survival because it had lost all wars against India. And information warfare is cheap. It does not cost as much as an aircraft or a tank or a battalion of infantry soldiers, or a battery of artillery. It's fairly cheap, and it can be done. So if you see the Pakistanis, there'll be a lot of action on Twitter. There'll be a lot of videos. There'll be a lot of articles in newspapers. But their army, I often joke with the Pakistanis, and they don't like it when I speak to them. I have friends in Pakistan, and I say that, the only fighting corps in Pakistan, is the ISPR. They're the only ones fighting. The rest of the Pakistani army is not fighting at all. So ISPR was raised in 1949. And now ISPR is headed by a major general. His name is Major General Babar Iftikhar. And earlier it was Asif Ghafoor, who's now gone on to command an infantry division in Pakistan. So ISPR is essentially run by the army. It is supposed to be inter-services. In Pakistan, anything that is inter-services, including the ISI, which is supposed to be an inter-services body by its very name and definition, that is run by the army. So our army says there is nothing called inter-services. We are inter-services and we'll run it. So the Pakistani army runs it. The way they do it is they have a lot of these young people in Pakistan, video editors, graphic designers, motion graphics, singers, content writers, these kind of people, right? And they are paid, and they are brought under the aegis of the ISPR, and these are the people who sort of create content and proliferate. Also, ISPR and ISI were directly controlling Lord Nazir Ahmed, or former Lord Nazir Ahmed of UK. He was a lord in obviously the House of Lords, needless to say. And then we ran a sustained campaign against him, and we brought truth out in the open. He was ISI's man in the British Parliament. And whenever an Indian prime minister or somebody went, he would have these free Kashmir written on buses and all that. So he was their conduit. He would funnel money and he would do all that, all those things. But what actually the British Parliament found out was that he was guilty of rape, and he was guilty of sexual crimes. And now he is no longer Lord Nazir Ahmed, he's Mr. Nazir Ahmed. So why he is out of jail absolutely beats me. That man deserves to be in prison for the rest of his life. But this is how the Pakistanis do it. They use the Pakistani diaspora, and they use the Pakistani diaspora effectively for information warfare purposes. Not everybody who's a Pakistani is involved in this, but there are people within Pakistan who control people who are outside Pakistan, and their hubs are Canada, their hubs are US and Europe, especially London, and they take advantage of something that exists. And I will tell you what that thing is. Pakistanis are past masters at playing victim. Okay, and they take advantage of what we know as white guilt. For the benefit of our viewers, there's this thing that the colonial experience was terrible, and nobody looks at the colonial experience with any sort of fondness. And there is this guilt that we have done wrong among a large section of the white population, and much of that is it is acceptable in the sense that it's true. I mean, of course, the kind of horrible things that the colonial powers did, whether the British or the French or the Italians or the Dutch or the Portuguese, was terrifying for the native population, and it was terrible in many senses. But the fact that Pakistan uses that niche, and Pakistan pushes its agenda, so they will get a lot of people and say that India is doing this in Kashmir, for example. Now that Pakistani has never come to Kashmir, and the British man or woman who's writing a pro-Pakistani article in any newspaper in UK has never been to Kashmir. But this playing up this victim card, Pakistan does it so effectively. I mean, no other nation on earth plays the victim card as beautifully as the Pakistanis, and hats off to the Pakistanis. A Pakistani will kill you. All right, Kamal? He will kill you, and then he will make you feel guilty for not dying properly. That is the level of victimhood that they sell to the outside world, and they are past masters of selling victimhood. And victimhood, the reason why I'm repeating this again and again is that the selling of this victimhood narrative, especially to the white population in the US, Canada, and UK, specifically in Europe, UK, is something that forms a cornerstone of Pakistan's information warfare setup. Get the white person, go to him, say that we have been wronged. And if any nation has taken a leaf out of Joseph Goebbels' book, it is Pakistan. The Chinese are at another level altogether. The Russians are at another level altogether. But if you have a good copy, which sometimes on a good day can pass off as the original, it is the Pakistanis.
Very, very fascinating, Major Ji. If we look at India now, and if we have to, let's say, look at whether India, as not just contemporary affairs or things that are happening now, but if you look at the last 70 years, has India in some ways woken up to this challenge a little too late? Would you think so?
No, absolutely, you're right. We've woken up a little too late. But the kind of finances we have, the kind of depth we have in terms of our own diaspora. If India got down to doing PSYOPs, and if India got down to doing IW operations, information warfare operations, with all seriousness, trust me, there would be no Chinese and there would be no Pakistanis anywhere. The issue is that nobody understands Chinese. The Chinese are richer than us. Absolutely. There is no shame in saying that, and there is no doubt. And the Chinese have a bigger spread across the world, but nobody understands Chinese. And information warfare is all about communicating. The Indians form the largest English-speaking population in the world. We have more English speakers than the combined population of Canada and the United States. So the thing is that we should focus on this, like they say in Hindi, "Der aaye durust aaye." It's never too late. Let's focus on this and let us understand that. I was telling an army general once, and he really appreciated it, and I will not say this because the army general is still serving. So I told this general that, sir, in today's day and age, a 16-year-old boy with a laptop, with the right hardware and software and the right kind of talent is far, far more dangerous than an armored brigade. And initially he was shocked. Then he said, "Gaurav, why are you saying this?" I said, "Sir, because today when you talk about network-centric operations in the army, when you talk about everything connected, to the World Wide Web, we are rolling out 5G this year, hopefully, right? Connectivity becomes much more deeply ingrained into our system. And what is connected can be hacked. What is connected can be influenced. And what is connected can always be compromised. So you need to raise an army of not just IW people, but also cyber experts. You need to have a separate core for that. The Indian Army is working on it, and there have been media reports. And whatever little knowledge I have is from media reports. The Indian Army is working on it, but the key here is civilians. Mm-hmm. Because the kind of talent that is required for this kind of warfare may be available in a limited quantity in any army, whether it's the British Army or the US Army, Chinese Army, Pakistan Army, or even the Indian Army. But the real talent is these, nerds, these IT kids. They are the real warriors. They are the real soldiers in this kind of war. IW, when you talk about information warfare, you need musicians, you need scriptwriters, you need social media experts. You need so many of such people, who may not be there in the army, because the Indian Army is a hardcore offensive force. That is the mindset from the academy. It's always attack, 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 attack. That is the way the army thinks. They also have defensive operations, but and the army is a great student. The Indian Army is a great student. They will learn, they will pick up, and they'll do it better than anybody else in the country over a period of time. But I think a lot more needs to be done in this space. A lot more needs to be done.
Absolutely, sir. And I want to come back to one of the things, which is, psyops or narratives, and narratives with things happening on the ground as well. So last year, when we saw the Galwan clash, India appeared to be in control when it came to demonstrating strength, not only on the battlefield, on the ground, but also in terms of minds, right? In the kind of actions that we took, and also the story that we told. So, do you think our approach towards these issues changing in the recent past, especially when it comes to combining things on the ground with what we put out?
See, there are two things. On ground, we are extremely strong. So let me tell you, any Indian who is watching this and who thinks that Chinese army has got an edge on us or edge over us, and the Indian army is a walkover, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. We today have the capability. We've done it. We've done it in East Ladakh very recently. My own unit is there. I'm from 17 Kumaon. My unit is there in East Ladakh. And we gave a hiding of a lifetime to the Chinese. They had to hide their own casualties. And in Galwan, where the Bihar regiment was and Punjab regiment was, and there was one field and one medium regiment of the artillery, These soldiers together, led by Colonel Babu, who laid down his life for the country, uh, you know, the Chinese know, that they are up against a formidable, battle-hardened army. The problem is that our information dissemination structures are still in their infancy. And that is what I always tell whoever I meet who is in a position to do something. Saying, don't look for talent within the army. The army is a fantastic fighting force. And I often say this, that the Indian army is the most fearsome fighting machine this world has ever seen. It's because, you should see these guys. They're terrifying. And the amount of violence that they can inflict is mind boggling. I mean, it's unimaginable the kind of violence the Indian army can bring to the doorstep of the enemy. However, information warfare is a different ballgame. Having spoken about the conventional conflict that may or may not happen in the Galwan area or East Ladakh, or now recently in Nakula in Sikkim, that apart, if you're talking from a PSYOPs point of view, if you're talking from an IW point of view, I think the gains made on ground by the Indian Army, and we mustn't forget the Indian Air Force, which has done a fantastic job. The gains made by them on ground, standing up to the Chinese, staring down the Chinese, hammering the life out of the Chinese. We were not able to, Kamal, sort of, disseminate it in such a manner, because the Indian Army has always focused on sharpening the edge of the sword. That is the mindset. Being a former army officer myself, I can tell you that training forms a very integral part of the Indian Army's existence itself. They are forever, if they are not fighting, they're training. That's all that the Indian Army does. It either fights or trains. There is nothing else to do in the forge. They're permanently training, and they're training for incidents like Galwan, or incidents like the line of actual control, the line of control, or counterinsurgency operations, etc., etc. Now, the thing is that there should be a realization. There is a realization, but I think we need to speed it up. That information warfare should be treated like any other strike corps of the army. Now we have pivot corps, which are mostly defensive in nature with limited offensive capability. And then we have strike corps, which go deep inside enemy territory. And we have 3 strike corps, and the 4th one is, of course, coming up. 17 Corps is coming up. It's a mountain strike corps in Panagarh. And we have 1, 2, and 21 strike corps. I think the mindset should be that information warfare is India's 4th strike corps. The ability to absolutely shatter the morale of the Pakistanis, the ability to absolutely shatter the morale of the Chinese. You see? And when I say shatter, I mean that there is an absolute loss of confidence in the enemy, that whether they can even fight or not. This is exactly what we did with the Pakistanis in 1971. They had ammunition for almost 1 month. They could have fought. They could have fought. The Pakistani army could have fought in Dhaka. But the advance of the Indian Armed Forces, the Army, Navy, and Air Force, was so fast, it was so brutal, it was so well coordinated by General and later Field Marshal Sam Manekshaw and other heroes of that entire war, all from the Army, Navy, and Air Force together, that it just shattered the confidence of the Pakistanis. They didn't know what hit them actually. And in 13 days, a new country was created. That same mindset, that same aggressive mindset. There was, General Jagjeet Singh Arora. Apart from General Sam Manekshaw, there was General Sagat Singh. And these are heroes. These are very, very big names. These are legends. That mindset, that offensive mindset, needs to percolate down at the IW level, the information warfare level. To have such a coherent, in terms of narrative, a coherent narrative, a consistent and continuous narrative, which is highly aggressive in nature and which is so effective across the border, that Pakistan starts to hemorrhage from within. China starts to feel actual pain from within. It can be done. It can be done, and I wish we do it. It requires an offensive mindset. It needs a certain set of people who will do this. It's not going to happen with the current this thing, because I think the Indian Army is waking up to the fact that IW is important. They're actually working on it. And I would like to close this question with this answer with Kamal saying that there is no better student than the Indian Army. When they get down to learning, they pick up stuff very fast. And they say that you teach a soldier for 6 months, he'll sit down, he'll learn from you, and after 6 months, that soldier will be teaching you. Or they're that good. So I hope something good comes out of it very soon.
Absolutely, sir. Thank you so much for sharing all those insights. I think you've very beautifully made that case and told us why this is important. I mean, why these efforts
Yes.
need to be made. Um, Major Saab, I want to now shift focus a little bit and look at the broader strategic questions that India faces. The border standoff at the LAC, it has continued into 2021, like 2020, and just recently we are hearing news about a clash even in Nakula in Sikkim.
Yes.
But more broadly, when it comes to China, how do you think we can meet this challenge of China? I mean, both in terms of, a short term but also long term.
Kamal, I'll just tell you this entire Chinese thing. No, I think it's highly overrated, first of all. China has never won a war in the last 50 years. Okay. The last war it won was against India in 1962. China has never won a war. Vietnam thrashed China very badly in 1979. So this entire halla gulla about China being a military superpower, that's all fake. All right. Yes, it is an economic superpower. Okay. But when you talk about fighting in mountains, all right, you can't beat the Indian soldier in the mountains simply because he's been there for very long. He has a certain kind of commitment, which the Chinese soldier comes for 3-4 years and he goes away. He has no commitment to his regiment, to his country. He's there because he's been asked to be there. He's possibly a single child. He's been pampered silly by his parents and his grandparents. He's like a quote unquote prince in the house. Our soldiers are far, far, far tougher in this age of AI, in this age of satellites, in this age of 5G. Nothing matters in the mountains. It's funny, but when you're at 16,000 feet and above, fighting at some height in East Ladakh, you see all these things disappear. What matters is blood and guts. It's East Ladakh is an infantry battle. Okay. Finally, the infantrymen will decide the outcome of East Ladakh, or whether it's Sikkim or any other place. It is the infantryman, it is the man with the rifle, the Indian soldier, he will decide the outcome. And let me tell you, the Chinese are no match. The problem is that in the larger strategic, this thing about the Chinese, you said the long term, short term, what the Chinese have done is they've used their checkbook very effectively. Right? So you have the Hanmantota port, and you have the Gwadar port in Pakistan, and you have the String of Pearls, South China Sea, and everything like that coming up and going up. Even in Africa, they have significant investments in Africa. But today, the world is waking up to the fact that Chinese are essentially, the famous character out of Shakespeare's plays, Shylock. That is China for you. That is China for you. It is a predatory power. It is not. China is not a force for good. It's a force for evil. And that is what China is. Like China has geographical borders with 14 countries, right? But it has boundary disputes with 22 or 23 countries. How can that even happen? How can India have a border dispute with Kazakhstan? But had China been here, they would have had a border dispute with Kazakhstan as well. Because we have a border with Pakistan, who has a border with Afghanistan, which has a border with Uzbekistan or Kazakhstan or one of the stans there. All right. But had it been China here, China would have had a border dispute. So they are predatory in nature. That's number one. Number two, China today in East Ladakh, at least, it is looking for, they say face. In the Orient, there is this huge thing about, saving face. Somebody has face, somebody does not have face. It's a matter of honor. China is looking for an honorable exit. China was thinking whether Trump would come back again or not. And China assumed, and to some extent rightly so, that if Trump came in for a second term, what would Trump's policies be against China? Also, if you have the US saying that, okay, uh, our new focus is going to be China, even under the Joe Biden dispensation, right? A new focus is going to be China. And why not? It has to be. Then China needs to come out and make a statement in front of the world. China feels that India is being propped up by the Western powers, especially America, to take on China. So if you quote unquote, sort out India, it takes the wind out of the Quad. It takes the wind out of the foreign powers saying that, okay, you were depending a lot on India and now see where India is. We have taught India a lesson. Now, what happened was that today, China is stuck between the devil and the deep sea. They thought that the Indian army would be a walkover. We'll come, we'll threaten the Indian army, we'll slap a few guys and they'll apologize and they'll get afraid and, they'll become afraid and they'll get scared and they'll take a walk back and we'll say, okay, this is China. China never counted for those 40 odd dead bodies of the PLA soldiers in Galwan. They were not prepared for the ferocity of the Indian Army's response. And we said that we don't covet your territory. This was the message from the army chief. We don't covet any country's territory, but please, for heaven's sake, don't think that you can come here and take an inch of Indian land. That's not going to happen. And that is when all these, I don't want to mention politicians because this is a strategic affairs dialogue, a geopolitical dialogue, and it doesn't do well for me to mention political parties, but any politician who says that, these many kilometers of Indian land has been, it's not going to happen. Please understand, forget about the BJP or any other political party being in power, right? If directions have been given to the Indian Army, that this is your territory and you will defend it, there is no way these orders are going to ever be violated. You see, even in 1962, the war that we lost against China, there was no withdrawal from the Indian Army. People died where they fought. Entire companies, my own regiment fought the Battle of Rizangla. The entire company was wiped out. There was no question of surrender. They don't teach you surrender in the Indian Army. Now the Chinese, the older generation knew this. The younger guys are forgotten. The Facebook ki generation, China ki, whatever passes off as Facebook in China, Weibo, Shibo, social media generation of China, they're softies. They came up against the Indian Army and then they realized that, this is a different animal altogether. So this is what is happening in Ladakh. China is looking for a way out. China is looking for a face saving so that they can quietly exit. And anyway, their population doesn't ask too many questions. But the world's attention is focused on East Ladakh. And this is what, China's got stuck. It's like, in Hindi, they say gale ki haddi. If you know what that means. It's like a bone stuck in the Indian Army. The Indian Army is a bone stuck in China's throat. Now, China doesn't know what to do with it. It doesn't know what to make out of the Indian Army. And that is China's problem in East Ladakh today.
Absolutely, Major Ji. You actually also mentioned some of the calculations behind Chinese actions at the LAC, and one of it is the international, atmosphere, and of which even the US is part of. So, like you mentioned, Trump, but there has been a leadership change in the US, and a lot has been said about it. Whether that will have implications, things like that. So, I just wanted to ask you, in terms of strategic affairs, military affairs. Do you see any kind of an impact of that leadership change in the US on India?
No, not very much. Not very much. This particular example that I'm about to give has been quoted in the Pakistani media, and I have quoted it personally on Republic Media Network. Joe Biden was Obama's deputy. Obama won the Nobel Peace Prize, all right? And Obama actually sanctioned drone strikes that wiped out entire wedding parties. Okay, the maximum number of drone strikes took place under the Obama administration. There was a troop surge in Afghanistan. There was a troop surge in Iraq. He had 2 terms, 8 years as president of the United States of America. And these were along with George Bush, these were amongst the most violent uh, terms as president that the world has seen. Joe Biden comes from that school of thought, outwardly liberal, outwardly liberal, outwardly even looking a little bit left leaning. But the fact of the matter is, all these people are products of the American deep state, and they know which side their bread is buttered. And also, you see, we have this impression that the president of the United States is the most powerful man on earth. I don't think that is true, because he also, uh, you know, there is an American deep state. There is the CIA. There is the Pentagon, right? Trump was a bit of a maverick. He said, "I know more about war than the generals." I mean, who would make a comment like that? It's only Trump who could have said something as funny as that. "I know more about war than the generals." But he said it, and his supporters supported him all the way. Good for him, but that statement is absolutely untrue. It's a false statement. But I don't think there is going to be a major shift in policy. India is seen as a stable, emerging global power. And all these statements by Kamala Harris and Joe Biden about Kashmir, right? All these are nothing but snowflakes in summer. When you're in the opposition, you say something else. When you're in power, you say something else. And we must never forget that at the end of the day, they are politicians. And politicians are alike, ek jaise hote hain, whether they're in India, whether they're in America, or whether they're anywhere else. Politicians are politicians. They will do and say whatever they think pleases their constituency and their electorate. And that is what Kamala Harris and Joe Biden said. And they're going to do exactly the opposite. And I don't see any major policy shift, if at all. If at all, there are going to be agreements with India to deepen and broaden the strategic relationship between India and the US. That is going to happen for sure.
Right. Major Ji, talking of politics, I wanted to ask you about what's happening in Pakistan's internal politics these days, and the power dynamics in that country. Can you tell us about that, and does that have any implications for India?
It has limited implications, Kamal. Pakistan is not a country, it's a state of mind. You see, Pakistan is a state of mind. You have to understand, like this PDM, pro-democracy movement jalsas that are happening, and Maulana Fazlur Rahman is there, and other people, all these people, like all the opposition parties. For example, the Noon League, which is headed by now Maryam Nawaz, because Mia Saab or Nawaz Sharif is now abroad, and directly she's controlling. Or you talk about the Pakistan People's Party, Bilawal Bhutto, because Zardari, as it is, has been discredited on many platforms for being corrupt. What is happening is that all these people have gathered around. The PDM may have lost steam today, but PDM again is a state of mind. Many Pakistani anchors are celebrating on television saying that, the PDM has lost steam and Imran Khan has won the race. No, this comes in tsunami waves. Okay, one wave. So Maulana Fazlur Rahman's long march was one wave. It did whatever damage it did. The PDM is the next wave. It'll peter out. Then there'll be another wave. So what is happening is, it is my estimate, an estimation. And this is my personal reading, and I think I'm pretty much on the ball on this one. So bear with me. Kamal, I think what is happening is that there has been a lot of churning within the Pakistan army. When General Qamar Javed Bajwa got the 3-year extension, right, as army chief, it hit the promotion prospects of more than 25 generals of the Pakistan army, many of them co-commanders. There is the Southern Command in Balochistan, there is the 5 Corps in Karachi. There are a lot of people who are vying for, because one guy gets promoted, the other guy gets promoted, and this entire thing of, and in Pakistan, it's not just a job. Pakistani army, it's like the Midas touch. Whatever you as a general, as a chief, as a corps commander, whatever you touch turns into gold. And many of these Pakistani generals are, they are dollar multimillionaires, hundreds upon hundreds of. And I wouldn't be. There are people who are saying that Musharraf is a dollar billionaire. I don't know. I can't say for sure whether he's a billionaire or a millionaire, but Musharraf has a house or several houses in Dubai. Musharraf has several houses in London, and Musharraf is living outside very, very comfortably. Where does that money come from? Certainly not from his pension, because he belonged to a middle class family when his family migrated from India to Pakistan during partition. He belongs to a middle class family. Where did that money come from? So you have the Fauji Foundation, right? Which is worth more than 20 billion US dollars. It's seriously heavy. The point that I'm trying to make is that whatever is happening in the politics of Pakistan, it is being driven partly by opposition parties, who I think are partly being driven by disaffected corps commanders or senior generals of the Pakistan Army, whose promotion and growth prospects were hampered or harmed by the 3-year extension given by Imran Khan to General Qamar Javed Bajwa. I think it will have a limited impact on India. This entire spiel about Kashmir and that normally what they keep saying in Pakistan, it's going to get more shrill. Number one. Number two, one of the outcomes is going to be that more faithful than the king, sort of thing. So Kashmir is the only foreign policy imperative of Pakistan. Pakistan has no other foreign. You see, they wanted to form an Islamic bloc with Turkey, with Iran, and with Malaysia, and that is what they wanted to do. And they said that we'll have a TV channel with these 3 people, and we'll take up the issue of Islamophobia, and we'll take up the issue of Kashmir. Then they said that no, we'll build a railway line. So what has happened? Immediately after this announcement, and no other country announced it except for Pakistanis because they get excited very easily, Turkey sent their ambassador to Israel, number one. Iran said that PIA cannot fly over Iran. And Malaysia said that PIA can't fly at all because they said that your planes are now with us and you've not given us the money. So Pakistan has nothing to give to the world, Kamal. This is something that I try to explain to Pakistanis and they get very offended. I said, you have nothing to give to the world except a geostrategic location. And now that has also outlived its utility. Okay. The only reason why Pakistan is important, it's not because of its nuclear weapons. The only reason why Pakistan is important is that it shares a border with Afghanistan. There is no other reason for the world to look towards Pakistan. It can absolutely be ignored, but how do you get to Central Asia? How do you get to Afghanistan? Iran is unstable, at least from the American point of view, it's unstable. And the problems with Iran will continue. The Pakistanis can be bought for money, right? Pakistanis can be purchased. Iranians cannot be. Iranians have a lot of self-respect. Pakistanis have no self-respect at all. So this is what is happening. It will have a limited impact on India, but I also pray for stability in Pakistan. And the reason why I pray for stability in Pakistan is that an unstable Pakistan is going to be everybody's migraine. And we have borders with Pakistan. So it's going to be our migraine as well. Very, very bad migraine, a nuclear migraine, an unstable Pakistan.
Absolutely, Major Ji. And my last question on Pakistan, and we have seen some very notable developments, not just inside Pakistan but also outside, related to Pakistan, and those have been some of these killings that have happened. Karima Baloch in Canada. There's another Baloch journalist in Sweden. And there was also a human rights activist recently in, I think, South Korea who was attacked, who spoke against the atrocities done by the Pakistan army. So I wanted to ask you, how does Pakistan, extend this kind of influence beyond its borders? And I mean, what do these incidents mean?
Kamal, this is not influence. This is simply a criminal mindset. Pakistan is a criminal enterprise. It's a state of mind. It's a criminal state of mind. There is no influence, you see. And you have your ISI people in various embassies. Okay. Let us say if you were to order a hit on a Baloch separatist. So all these people, ISI people, are in touch with the underworld element of any city, the criminal element of any city. So You just give the photograph of the person you want eliminated and give 10,000 pounds. Somebody will do it for you. That's it. There is no influence. Pakistan. See, there was an interview of General Musharraf taken by a very, very famous and senior Pakistani journalist called Wajahat Khan. And this interview was taken in his Dubai penthouse, Musharraf's Dubai penthouse, in which Musharraf says that they should actually do this. They should actually send assassins and eliminate people who speak against them. So Pakistan is simply stating what it does. See, the Israelis do it differently. Israelis, you will not have the Israelis killing people because they criticize the Israeli armed forces. Never. There are people inside Israel, left-leaning people who criticize the Israeli armed forces, and they're paying their taxes and they're very happy. Israel will send a mission if they feel that, like for example, Israel has never owned up to it, but the recent killing of the nuclear scientist in Iran. So Israel will carry out such operations if they feel that the existence or the security of the state of Israel is threatened. That is one matter. Pakistanis are still, in that mindset that, if you abuse me, I'll sort you out. You see, you've said something against the Pakistani army, or you've questioned the Pakistani, we'll kill you. Pakistan is therefore that criminal mindset that I can have you killed, I can have you bummed off. And this is said openly by Pervez Musharraf. Pervez Musharraf was both their army chief and their military dictator and their president and whatever you want to call him. But he was there and he has admitted openly this is Pakistan's policy. These are not just, there have been many cases in the past. There have been disappearances of journalists within Pakistan. People have been killed inside Pakistan. There was a journalist called Matiullah Jan who was picked up. He was going to drop his wife. She's a teacher in a school. Matiullah Jan was picked up and tortured for 3 days. And then, so this is very common in Pakistan. They're very common. Killing somebody, harassing somebody, killing somebody's brother, passing on a message. Why do you think there are so many Pakistanis who live abroad and speak against Pakistan on Facebook and YouTube and Twitter and Instagram? These are all the people who cannot go back to Pakistan because their lives are threatened by the ISI and the deep state, the Pakistan army, etc. So that is what is happening.
Absolutely, Major Ji. And I think the same mindset, like you said, reflects both in its its actions on people outside as well as inside, be it journalists, politicians, even sometimes. Thank you so much, Major Ji. It has been a very, very fascinating conversation. And there's so much that our viewers are taking away from that. Thank you so much for answering our questions and throwing light on so many different topics.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Indeed a pleasure, Kamal. Thank you for inviting me over. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for joining us. To our viewers, I would like to request you, please do continue to subscribe and share our videos, and do subscribe to both our channels, the Festival of Bharat and the Citti Media channel, because we'll be uploading content on both of them. We'll be back with another such fascinating conversation. Until then, take care and namaste.
Namaste. We hope you enjoyed this Citti Media content. Please remember to subscribe to us and switch on the notifications for this channel. For our other social media links, more content, and to support our work, please visit citti.net. Dhanyavad. Namaskar.